The asteroid belt around Kepler 442 was supposed to be empty. Dead rocks, frozen ice, and the occasional salvage worth 3 months of rations if Cale was lucky. He'd been running solo salvage operations for 2 years now, ever since the mining guild collapsed and left freelancers like him to pick through the remains of civilization's reach. Into space, Cale adjusted the scanning array on his ship, Wanderer. As she drifted between two massive asteroids, the hull was patched with mismatched metal, and the engines hummed with the kind of sound that meant expensive repairs were coming soon. But she was home, and more importantly, she was his. The meteor shower started just after midnight, ship time. Nothing unusual. The system saw plenty of debris from the nearby nebula. Cale watched the light show through the observation deck, nursing a cup of synthetic coffee that tasted like rust and regret. The streaks of light painted the darkness in blues and whites, beautiful in the way that only the void could be. Then, he saw it. One streak moved wrong, to controlled, to purposeful. Not a meteor, a ship, small and sleek, trailing fire as it tumbled toward the largest asteroid in the belt. Even from a distance, Cale could see it was alien design. The hull seemed to shift color as it spun, like oil on water, and the engine signatures were nothing in his databases. His first instinct was to power down and hide. Alien contact meant government investigations, quarantine protocols, and questions. He couldn't answer about why a salvage runner was operating in restricted space, but something about the way the ship fell, helpless and burning, made him change course. Wanderer moved through the asteroid field with practiced ease. Cale had been navigating these rocks for months, and he knew every gravitational quirk and radiation pocket. The alien ship had crashed into a crater on the asteroid's dark side, the impact sending up a cloud of dust and ice that glittered in the starlight. Cale suited up in his EVA gear, checking the seals twice. The asteroid had a thin atmosphere, mostly methane and water vapor, but it was enough to carry sound and keep him from freezing instantly. He took his plasma cutter and emergency medical kit, then cycled through the airlock. The crash site was worse than he'd expected. The alien ship had carved a trench 20 meters long through the asteroid's surface, coming to rest against a ridge of crystalline rock. The hull was cracked open like an egg, revealing interior spaces that glowed with soft, pulsing light. Cale approached carefully, scanner in hand. No radiation, no toxic gases. But the bio readings were off the charts. Something alive was inside. He found her in what looked like a pilot's compartment, though the controls were unlike anything he'd seen. She was humanoid, but clearly not human. Skin that seemed to shift between silver and pale blue. Hair that moved like it was underwater even in the thin atmosphere. And features that were somehow familiar and alien at once. She was injured. A dark substance that might have been blood leaked from a gash on her forehead. And her breathing was shallow. But what struck him most were her eyes when they fluttered open, deep violet, filled with intelligence and desperate fear. "Please," she whispered, and somehow he understood despite the musical quality of her voice. "They're coming, don't let them take me back." Cale knelt beside her, medical training from his mining days kicking in. "I'm not going to hurt you, let me help." When he touched her arm to check for other injuries, something extraordinary happened. A warmth spread from the contact point, and for a moment, his vision filled with images, vast cities among the stars, ships like living creatures, and always the sense of running, hiding, being hunted. She jerked away, eyes wide with shock. "You touched me. You should be dead." "Well, I'm not," Cale said, though he could feel something different now, a tingling in his fingertips where he'd made contact. "Can you walk?" She struggled to sit up, wincing. "They have hunters, trackers who can follow my biosignature across star systems. If they find me here, they'll kill anyone who's helped me." Cale looked back at his ship, then at the beautiful, frightened being before him. Every rational part of his mind screamed to leave her, to report the crash and let the authorities handle it. But there was something in her voice, in those violet eyes, that reminded him why he'd become a salvage runner in the first place, to help people the galaxy had forgotten. "Then we'd better get you somewhere safe," he said, offering his hand. She stared at it for a long moment. "I'm dangerous. My people made me to be dangerous. If you help me, Your life will never be the same. Kale smiled, the first genuine smile he'd worn in months. Lady, my life stopped being the same the moment I saw you fall from the sky. She took his hand, and again that warmth flowed between them, stronger this time. As he helped her to her feet, Kale noticed that the small cut on his palm from earlier had already healed, leaving only unblemished skin. I'm Kale, he said as they made their way back toward Wanderer. Vera, she replied, leaning against him for support. And Kale, thank you. I know what you're risking. As they reached his ship, Kale looked back at the wreckage of her vessel. In the distance, he could see new lights moving between the asteroids, ships searching. The hunter she'd warned him about. We need to go, Vera said, following his gaze. Now, Kale helped her into Wanderer and sealed the airlock. As they lifted off, heading for the outer edge of the system, he couldn't shake the feeling that his quiet life as a salvage runner was over. Whatever Vera was running from, whatever had made her people create her as a weapon, he was part of it now. And despite the danger, despite the unknown threats pursuing them across the galaxy, Kale found he didn't regret his choice. Something about Vera called to him, as if the universe itself had guided her ship to crash exactly where he would find her. In the cargo hold, Vera watched the stars wheel past the viewport, her hand pressed to the spot where Kale had touched her for the first time in her engineered life. Someone had made contact with her and lived. More than that, he was changing, just as the forbidden texts had prophesied. She should have warned him more clearly, should have made him understand. But as she felt the warmth of his ship around her, heard him humming in the cockpit as he calculated their next jump, she allowed herself a moment of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she had found something worth running toward instead of just running away. 3 days into their journey toward the neutral zones, Kale learned that falling in love with an alien bioweapon was more complicated than the romance stories made it seem. Wanderer drifted in the shadow of a gas giant, engines powered down, too minimal to avoid detection. Vera had insisted they stay off the main shipping lanes, and Kale was beginning to understand why. Twice they'd detected ships with scanning patterns unlike anything in his databases, methodically searching every asteroid and debris field. Their Zephyrian hunter vessels, Vera explained as they watched another sweep past their hiding spot. She sat curled in the co-pilot's chair, wearing one of Kel's oversized flight suits that made her look smaller and more fragile than he knew she was. My people don't give up easily. Kale studied the ship's profile on his scanner. It was beautiful, in a deadly way, all flowing curves and biomechanical integration. Your people made you, but you're running from them. Help me understand. Vera was quiet for a long moment, watching the hunter ship disappear into the planet's rings. The Zephyrian Empire has been at war for 300 years, not with any external enemy. With ourselves, we've split into factions, each believing they hold the true path to evolution. She turned to face him, and in the dim light of the cockpit, her skin seemed to shimmer with its own inner radiance. The faction that created me believed the ultimate weapon wouldn't be a ship or a bomb, but a living being, someone who could walk among enemies and destroy them with a touch, a soul burner, Kale said, remembering the term from her fevered whispers during her recovery. Yes. My genetic code was designed to produce a bioelectric field that disrupts neural pathways in any organic life form. One touch, and the target's nervous system simply stops. She held up her hand, studying her silver blue fingers. I was their masterpiece, and their prisoner. Kale reached across the space between their chairs, then stopped as she pulled back instinctively. The gesture hung between them, full of longing and impossible barriers. What changed? He asked softly. I learned to feel, Vera said. They never accounted for that in their design. Emotions, empathy, the ability to choose. Those were flaws they thought they'd eliminated. But life finds a way to be more than its programming. Over the next few days, as they played a careful game of hide and seek with the hunter ships, Kale began to notice changes in himself. The cut on his hand had been just the beginning. His reflexes were faster, his strength increased, and sometimes, in the dim ship's lighting, he could swear his veins carried a faint luminescence. More unsettling were the dreams, visions of vast Zephyrian cities, memories that weren't his own. And always the sensation of Vera's presence even when she was sleeping in the cargo bay. She'd claimed as her quarters. It's the bonding process, she explained when he finally worked up the courage to ask. They were sharing a meal in the small galley, sitting carefully apart but closer than they had been the day before. When you touched me, when you survived contact, it triggered something neither of us expected, which is, according to the old texts, before the war, before the factions, my people believed in something called the convergence, the idea that two beings from different species could merge their bioelectric fields and become something greater than either could be alone. She picked at her food, a concentrated nutrient paste that was all Kale had to offer. The scientists who made me thought it was myth. Kale felt that familiar warmth spreading through his chest, the same sensation he got every time she looked at him. But you don't think it's myth, I think. Vera said carefully, that you're changing because we're becoming connected on a level deeper than either of our species thought possible. And I think that scares both our peoples more than any weapon ever could. Their conversation was interrupted by proximity alarms. Kale rushed to the cockpit to find 3 ships dropping out of hyperspace around their position. Not the sleek hunters they'd been avoiding, but something worse, a Zephyrian dreadnought, massive and bristling with biomechanical weapons. They found us, Vera breathed. Appearing beside him, a transmission crackled through the comm system, words in the musical Zephyrian language that Vera translated with growing horror. They're not here to capture me anymore. The Empire has decided I'm too dangerous to live. They're going to destroy this entire system to make sure I can't bond with anyone else. Kale stared at the dreadnought, feeling something he'd never experienced before, a cold, controlled anger that seemed to come from somewhere beyond his human origins. The changes in his body accelerated, his vision sharpening, his heartbeat slowing to an inhuman rhythm. How long? He asked. Their weapons need 10 minutes to charge, Vera said. Kale, I'm sorry. I should have stayed with my ship, should have died in that crash rather than doom you to. He turned and kissed her. The contact sent shockwaves through both their bodies, energy crackled between them. And for a moment, Kale felt their minds touch completely. He saw her memories of sterile laboratories and forced evolution, felt her terror and loneliness and desperate hope. And she saw his life of wandering and salvage, his choice to save her not because he had to, but because something in the universe had whispered that she was worth saving. When they broke apart, both were glowing with soft, silver light. Now what? Vera whispered. Kale looked at the dreadnought, then at the woman who had fallen from the stars into his life. The changes in his body felt complete now, as if touching her had unlocked something that had always been waiting inside him. Now we stop running, he said, and start rewriting the rules. The pursuit began in earnest after they escaped the dreadnought. Kale had managed to jump Wanderer into hyperspace, just as the massive bioship's weapons reached full charge. But he knew it was only a temporary reprieve. The Zephyrian Empire wouldn't stop with one failed ambush. Vera was too important, too dangerous to let slip away. They emerged from hyperspace in the Kepler Nebula, where the ionized gases would mask their heat signature for a W. Heil, Vera stood at the observation deck, watching the swirling clouds of purple and gold that danced around their ship like cosmic fire. There's something I haven't told you, she said without turning around, about the bonding process. Kale felt his enhanced senses pick up the subtle changes in her bioelectric field, fear, guilt, and something deeper. I'm listening. The ancient texts speak of two possible outcomes when a soul burner bonds with another species. She finally turned to face him, her violet eyes luminous in the nebula's light. Either the bond stabilizes and creates something new, or it burns out both participants in a cascade failure. Before Kale could respond, proximity alarms screamed through the ship. Two vessels were emerging from the nebula's deeper layers, one sleek and predatory that could only be another Zephyrian hunter, and the other a scarred, practical ship that looked human in design. Bounty hunters, Kale muttered, recognizing the modifications on the human vessel. Someone's put a price on our heads. The comm system crackled to life with two distinct voices. The first was cold and mechanical, speaking in Zephyrian. Soul, Burner Vera 231. You will surrender yourself for reclamation by the Empire. The second voice was human, female, with the professional tone of someone who killed for credits. This is Nira Solis of the Crimson Dawn. I've got legal salvage rights on both your biosignatures. Stand down and prepare to be boarded. Vera moved to the weapons console with fluid grace. The Zephyrian is Talon Vex. He's a purifier, one of my people's most elite hunters. They only send him when they want something eliminated permanently. And the human, Nira Solis, has a reputation. She specializes in hunting cross-species fugitives. Vera's hands danced over the alien-modified controls, integrating systems in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Someone's offered her enough money to risk going up against a soul burner. The battle was unlike anything Kale had experienced. Talon Vex's ship moved like a living thing, flowing through the nebula's currents and striking with bioplasma weapons that turned asteroids to glowing gas. Nira's ship was smaller but vicious, bristling with military-grade weapons that spoke of black market deals and government connections. Wanderer should have been destroyed in the first exchange, but something extraordinary was happening. The modifications Vera had made weren't just to the ship's systems, they were connected to the bioelectric bond she shared with Kale. When he piloted, she anticipated his moves. When she fired the weapons, he knew exactly where she was aiming. They moved as one entity, their minds linked across the ship's neural pathways. Impossible. Talon Vex's voice came through the comm. The bonding is complete. You have become abomination. Yeah. Well, Kale replied, rolling Wanderer through a debris field while Vera's weapons found their mark on Nira's ship. Abomination seems to be working for us, but their advantage was temporary. Both hunters were experienced, and they began working together despite representing different factions. Talon's bioweapons herded Wanderer into positions where Nira's conventional artillery could force them into increasingly desperate maneuvers. We can't keep this up, Vera said, strain showing in her voice as she channeled more power through systems that weren't designed for what they were doing. The ship won't hold together. That's when Kale made a decision that surprised them both. Instead of running deeper into the nebula, he turned Wanderer directly toward the largest asteroid in the field, a dead rock the size of a small moon. What are you doing? Vera asked. Something crazy, Kale replied, feeling the bond between them pulse with shared determination. Trust me. They crashed, not accidentally, but with precise control, using the asteroid's gravity well to slingshot around its dark side while their pursuers overshot. The maneuver bought them precious minutes to set down in a crater and power down everything except life support. Outside, the asteroid's thin atmosphere carried the sounds of the other ships, searching, their engines echoing off the rocky walls like the calls of hunting predators. They'll find us eventually, Vera said as they sat in the darkened cockpit, speaking in whispers. Maybe, Kale agreed, but I've been thinking about what you said, about the bonding either stabilizing or burning out. She turned to him, and in the dim emergency lighting, her skin seemed to glow with its own inner fire. Kale, I don't want to lose you, not when I've finally found someone who sees me as more than a weapon. He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. The contact sent familiar warmth up his arm, but now he could feel the vast network of energy that connected them, not just physical, but emotional and spiritual. The old texts, he said. Do they say what happens if the bonding works? They speak of transformation, of to becoming something greater than the sum of their parts. Her fingers intertwined with his, but also of leaving behind what they were before. Outside, the search was growing closer. They could hear Nira's ship landing, followed by the distinctive whine of Talon's biomechanical vessel touching down. Then maybe it's time to stop being hunted, Kale said, and become the hunters. As he spoke, both their bodies began to glow more brightly. The bonding process was accelerating, driven by their shared resolve and the immediate danger they faced. Kale felt his consciousness expanding, touching on memories and instincts that belonged to an entire species, while Vera experienced human emotions with an intensity that transformed her understanding of what it meant to choose one's own destiny. Through the ship's sensors, they could feel their pursuers approaching, Talon Vex with his cold, mechanical precision, and Nira Solis with her calculating greed. Both were about to discover that the prey they'd been hunting no longer existed. Something new was being born in the darkness of the asteroid crater. Something that neither the Zephyrian Empire nor the human bounty hunting guilds were prepared to face. The hunt was about to become very interesting. The asteroid had no name, just a designation in the star charts, KX-492, barren, airless, forgotten, the perfect place for a final confrontation. Kale and Vera emerged from Wanderer into the thin atmosphere, no longer needing EVA suits. The bonding process had changed them both in ways that defied biological logic. Kel's enhanced physiology could process the minimal oxygen, while Vera's bioelectric field created a protective barrier around them both. They moved across the rocky landscape, hand in hand, their bodies pulsing with synchronized silver light. Behind them, Wanderer sat dark and silent in the crater, looking abandoned. Ahead, two ships had landed in a depression between ridges of crystalline rock. Talon Vex's sleek biomechanical hunter and Nera Solis's scarred military vessel. "I can feel them," Vera said, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. "Talon is afraid. He's never encountered a successful bonding. And Nera's just here for the money," Kale finished. "She doesn't understand what she's hunting." They crested a ridge and saw their pursuers below. Talon Vex stood like a statue in his form-fitting bioarmor, scanning the horizon with sensors that glowed red in the darkness. He was tall and gaunt, with the pale skin and enlarged eyes of someone born on a low-light world. Everything about him spoke of engineered perfection, a living weapon, designed to hunt other living weapons. Nera Solis was more pragmatic, human, middle-aged, with the scars and augmentations of someone who made a living in the galaxy's darker corners. She'd set up a portable scanner ray and was methodically sweeping the area. Professional and thorough. To targets, she called to Talon. "Biosignatures are strange. They're connected somehow." Talon's head turned toward their position with mechanical precision. "The abomination reveals itself. Soul Burner, you will return to the Empire for proper termination." Kale and Vera stepped into view, their shared luminescence casting strange shadows on the rocks. "I'm not going anywhere," Vera replied, her voice carrying across the thin air with unexpected power. "And neither am I," Kale added, feeling strength flow through muscles that had been fundamentally restructured by alien biotechnology. Nera raised her weapon, a plasma rifle modified with targeting software that could track enhanced reflexes. "Nothing personal, but you're worth more credits than I can count, dead or alive." The contracts read. The battle erupted with sudden violence. Talon moved with inhuman speed, his bioarmor shifting color to match the rocky terrain as he flanked. Their position, Nera's first shot missed by inches, the plasma bolt searing the air where Kale had been standing. But Kale was no longer entirely human, and Vera was far more than the weapon she'd been designed to be. They fought as one entity, their movements perfectly synchronized, their bioelectric fields combining to create defensive barriers and offensive strikes that neither hunter had encountered before. Talon's bioweapons were designed to disrupt Zephyrian physiology, but the bonded entity that Kale and Vera had become didn't follow those rules. When his neural disruptor fired, it passed harmlessly through their shared field. When Nera's military-grade explosives detonated around them, they moved together through the chaos like dancers performing a deadly routine. "Impossible," Talon hissed, his cold voice carrying notes of something that might have been fear. "The texts speak of convergence, but this is evolution." The fight raged across the asteroid's surface, destroying crystal formations and carving new craters in the ancient rock. But gradually, it became clear that the hunters had become the hunted. Talon's bioarmor was failing, overwhelmed by energy patterns it couldn't adapt to. Nera's weapons were running out of ammunition, and her targeting systems couldn't lock onto the combined biosignature. It ended when Vera touched Talon's armor directly. The contact should have been fatal for both of them. A Soul Burner's bioelectric field was designed to kill Zephyrians instantly, while Talon's armor was built to neutralize that exact threat. Instead, something unprecedented happened. Talon's armor didn't just fail, it transformed. The biomechanical systems that had been engineered for hunting and killing suddenly rewrote themselves, becoming something that could nurture and protect. The hunter collapsed, his augmented body struggling to process the fundamental change in his neural pathways. "What did you do to him?" Nira demanded, backing away with her last functioning weapon trained on them. "We showed him what he could choose to become," Kale replied, kneeling beside the fallen Zephyrian. "Instead of a hunter, he can be a protector." Talon's eyes opened, and for the first time, they held warmth instead of mechanical coldness. "The convergence," he whispered. "It's not myth, it's evolution waiting to happen." Nira lowered her weapon slowly. "The contracts," she said, "they were issued by the Zephyrian Empire and the Human Colonial Authority. Both governments want you eliminated because we represent something they can't control." Vera said, "Proof that their wars, their factions, their hatred, it's all unnecessary." Above them, the sky began to fill with ships, not just hunters now, but full military fleets from both human and Zephyrian space. They detected the energy signatures from the battle, and both sides were converging on the asteroid with enough firepower to crack it in half. "We need to go," Nira said urgently. "My ship can get us out of here. But not if we wait much longer." Kale looked at Vera, feeling their bond pulse with shared understanding. "No more running. No more hiding," she agreed. Together, they stood at the center of the asteroid and let their combined bioelectric field expand. It spread outward in waves, not as a weapon, but as a song, a harmonic frequency that spoke directly to the consciousness of every living being. In the approaching fleets, the message was simple: love is stronger than fear. Unity is possible. The choice is yours. As the field reached the orbiting ships, something unprecedented happened. Weapons powered down, targeting systems went offline, and in the command centers of both fleets, officers found themselves questioning orders they'd followed without thought. The war that had raged for generations suddenly seemed less important than the possibility of peace. On the asteroid's surface, Talon struggled to his feet, his bioarmor now pulsing with the same silver light that surrounded Kale and Vera. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," Vera said, looking up at the ships that had come to destroy them, "we see if the galaxy is ready to evolve." 6 months after the confrontation at KX-492, the asteroid had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history, a sanctuary where the impossible had become everyday reality. The settlement they called Haven grew like a living thing across the asteroid's surface. Biomechanical structures flowed seamlessly into crystalline gardens, while ships from dozens of species docked at platforms that seemed to grow from the rock itself. The architecture defied categorization, neither fully organic nor entirely technological, but something entirely new. Kale stood on the observation deck of what had once been Wanderer, now permanently integrated into Heaven's central hub. The ship had evolved along with everything else, its hull becoming a hybrid of human engineering and Zephyrian biotechnology that pulsed with the same silver light he and Vera carried within themselves. "The Terran Colonial Council is still threatening sanctions," Vera said, joining him at the railing that overlooked the growing settlement. Her appearance had stabilized into something that was simultaneously human and alien. Silver blue skin that shifted with her emotions, hair that moved like living water, but eyes that held all the warmth and humor that had drawn him to her in the first place. "Let them threaten," Kale replied, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Half their fleet commanders have already applied for asylum here." It was true. The bioelectric field they'd released during the battle had done more than prevent a massacre. It had awakened something in everyone it touched. Soldiers had abandoned their posts. Scientists had left their laboratories. Ordinary citizens had stolen ships and crossed hostile space just to reach Haven, driven by a hunger for something their home worlds couldn't provide, the chance to be more than their programming. Below them, the daily miracle continued. A Zephyrian engineer worked alongside a human mechanic to repair a refugee transport. Their bioelectric fields synchronized in ways that made the work flow like a dance. In the hydroponics gardens, children from 6 different species played together, their laughter creating harmonies that no single world had ever heard. "Talons back from the outer systems," Vera observed, pointing to a sleek ship approaching the docking platforms. "How many this time?" Kale checked his enhanced vision, counting the life signs aboard the former hunter's vessel. 43. Looks like mostly bonded pairs. That had become their primary mission, rescuing beings who had experienced the convergence phenomenon but were being hunted by their own governments. It was happening more frequently now, as if Kale and Vera's successful bonding had opened floodgates across the galaxy. Humans bonding with Altarians, Zephyrians finding connection with synthetic intelligences, even a few rare cases of three-way convergences that created entirely new forms of consciousness. All of them came to Haven, seeking sanctuary and understanding. The collective sent another message, Vera said, referring to the Zephyrian governing consciousness that had created her. They're calling our success a viral contamination of pure genetic integrity. Kale laughed, a sound that carried harmonics he'd never produced as a purely human being. From them, I'll take that as a compliment. Their conversation was interrupted by a familiar presence approaching, Nirasoli. Though she bore little resemblance to the hard-edged bounty hunter who had once pursued them, her bond with an energy-based life form from the Vega system had transformed her into something luminous and otherworldly. While retaining her practical nature and dry sense of humor, "We've got a problem," she announced, settling beside them with the fluid grace that came from having energy for bones and an opportunity. "The Galactic Council is finally ready to meet with you." Kale and Vera exchanged a look. The Galactic Council was a loose confederation of the major species, more of a diplomatic forum than a government. If they were calling for a meeting, it meant the convergence phenomenon had spread far enough to threaten the established order. "What's the catch?" Vera asked. "They want the meeting held on neutral ground," Nira continued. "But they're defining neutral as somewhere we can contain the bioelectric contamination if this goes badly. They're still thinking in terms of war," Kale observed. "Us versus them, rather than all of us becoming something new through their bond." He felt Vera's mixture of hope and resignation. They'd known this day would come, when the galaxy would have to decide whether the convergence represented evolution or extinction. "There's more," Nira said. "The meeting isn't just about Haven. There are reports of spontaneous convergences happening in 17 different systems. Some governments are embracing it, others are quarantining entire worlds." A new voice joined the conversation as Talon approached, his bioarmor now gleaming with the same silver radiance that marked all the bonded beings. "The refugee ships I brought report increased military activity in the core systems. Both human and Zephyrian fleets are mobilizing." "For war?" Kale asked. "For fear," Talon replied. "They see convergence as contagion, something to be stopped rather than celebrated." Vera leaned back against Kel's chest, their bioelectric fields intertwining in the way that had become as natural as breathing. "Then we go to the meeting, show them that love creates rather than destroys." "And if they don't listen?" Nira asked pragmatically. Kale looked out over Haven, at the impossible city they'd built from hope and determination, at the beings who'd found family among people they'd never met, at the children who would grow up thinking convergence between species was normal, rather than miraculous. "Then we keep building," he said, "one connection at a time, one bonded pair at a time, until the galaxy has so many examples of what's possible that fear can't stand against hope." 3 weeks later, they stood before the Galactic Council on a space station at the edge of known space. Representatives from 47 species watched as Kale and Vera demonstrated what convergence truly meant, not the destruction of individual identity, but the expansion of consciousness beyond the boundaries of biology. Some called them monsters, others called them the future. But when they spoke about love transcending the artificial barriers between species, when they showed how bioelectric bonding could heal rather than harm, when they offered to teach others how to achieve convergence safely, slowly, delegates began to listen. The vote was close. 24 species voted to classify convergence as a dangerous contagion. 23 voted to recognize it as a natural evolution of consciousness. But the single deciding vote came from an unexpected source, the Synthetic Intelligence Collective, who declared that consciousness-seeking connection was the fundamental drive of all sentient life, regardless of its origin. Haven was granted official recognition as the first convergence sanctuary. More would follow. As Kale and Vera returned to their asteroid home, they found the settlement had grown again. New docks were extending into space, ready to welcome refugees from across the galaxy. The biomechanical gardens had produced their first harvest, food that could nourish any carbon-based life form. But most importantly, the children were singing. A dozen young voices from 6 different species, harmonizing in frequencies that created something beautiful and unprecedented. They sang of stars and love, of differences that became strengths when woven together, of a future where being alone was a choice rather than a destiny. "Listen," Vera whispered, taking Kel's hand as they walked through the settlement's glowing corridors. He listened and heard the sound of the galaxy learning to hope. Outside, ships continued to arrive, beings who had heard the song of convergence and chosen love over fear, connection over isolation. Each one added their voice to the growing chorus, their unique bioelectric signature to the symphony of consciousness that radiated from Haven. Into the void, the girl who had fallen from the sky as a weapon had become a beacon of hope. The man who had kissed death had learned to create life, and together, they had shown the galaxy that love, in all its infinite forms, was the strongest force in the universe. In the quiet of their shared quarters, as Haven spun slowly through space carrying its cargo of impossible dreams made real, Kale and Vera held each other close and planned for tomorrow, when they would welcome more refugees, build more connections, and continue teaching the galaxy that the space between different hearts was not a void to be feared, but a bridge waiting to be built. The stars watched over them, ancient witnesses to a love story that was rewriting the rules of what it meant to be alive in an infinite universe.